This time, the Braxton family drama hit a breaking point, and Tamar couldn't hold it together anymore. After comments and actions linked to Toni Braxton set social media on fire, the internet exploded with reckless rumors that quickly spiraled out of control. What should have stayed private turned into a public storm, and Tamar was left watching strangers debate her life like it was a headline. Insiders say the emotional weight became too heavy, and Tamar broke down behind the scenes as the narrative grew darker and more invasive by the hour. Fans are divided, old family tensions are resurfacing, and people are asking how far is too far when it comes to family and fame. Because when rumors mix with sibling conflict, the damage cuts deeper, and this time it feels personal. This isn't just drama, it's heartbreaking. The Braxton family has never been strangers to tension, but this moment felt different. This wasn't reality TV arguing. This wasn't sibling shade wrapped in humor. This was raw, emotional, and deeply personal, and it left Tamar Braxton emotionally overwhelmed in a way fans could feel even without seeing it on camera. The chaos started when remarks and actions connected to Toni Braxton ignited intense online speculation. Nothing was officially stated. No documents were verified, no confirmations were made. But the internet doesn't wait for confirmation, it reacts first and asks questions later. And once Tamar's name was pulled into that reaction, things spiraled fast. What should have stayed between sisters was dragged into public view by blogs, reaction pages, and comment sections hungry for drama. Words were twisted. Context was ignored. And suddenly, Tamar's personal life became a topic strangers felt entitled to debate. This is where the emotional pressure built. Tamar has always been expressive, loud when happy, vocal when hurt, but this time her silence spoke volumes. According to people close to her, the rumors hit a nerve not because of their content, but because of who they were coming from and how quickly they spread. When family tension meets internet speculation, the impact cuts deeper. Fans immediately noticed Tamar pulling back. Less posting, less joking, less interaction. And behind that quiet, insiders say, was a woman emotionally exhausted from watching her name dragged through narratives she never approved. The situation exposed an uncomfortable truth about public families. Disagreements that might heal privately become permanent scars when played out online. The Braxtons have always lived publicly, but public life doesn't mean surrendering every boundary. Yet that's exactly what the internet demanded. Comment sections filled with assumptions. Some people blamed Toni. Others blamed Tamar. Some dragged up old family history, turning past conflicts into proof of current drama. None of it was confirmed, but it didn't matter. The story was moving faster than facts. And that's when Tamar reportedly broke down. Not for views, not on a live stream, but privately away from cameras. Because watching millions of strangers speculate about your health, your life, your family relationships is not just stressful, it's traumatic. Especially when the source of the chaos feels close to home. What made this situation even more painful is the long history between the sisters. Tamar and Toni's relationship has always been complicated. Love mixed with rivalry, admiration mixed with resentment, support mixed with misunderstanding. Fans have watched it evolve for years, but what they don't see is how much emotional labor it takes to keep family bonds intact under constant scrutiny. This moment threatened that balance. Some fans accused Toni of being careless with her words. Others argued she never intended harm, but intent doesn't erase impact. And once the internet weaponizes speculation, even the smallest spark can become a wildfire. Tamar's emotional reaction wasn't about guilt or confirmation, it was about loss of control, loss of privacy, loss of narrative, loss of safety. When rumors attach to your name, you no longer get to decide what people believe about you. That's the cruel part, and the internet showed very little mercy. Instead of stepping back, many leaned in harder. Reaction videos multiplied, thumbnails grew more extreme, language became more invasive. The conversation drifted from concern into consumption. That's when fans who truly care began pushing back. They called out the recklessness. They reminded people that rumors are not facts. They asked why a woman's pain was being used as content. But outrage culture rarely listens to caution. Meanwhile, Tamar stayed quiet, not because she had nothing to say, but because sometimes silence is the only way to survive public storms. Speaking too soon invites distortion, speaking emotionally invites mockery, and speaking at all keeps the story alive. So she withdrew, and in that withdrawal the pain became visible to those paying attention. This wasn't a meltdown, it was heartbreak. The kind that comes from realizing that fame doesn't protect you from harm, It magnifies it. That family conflict doesn't stay private when millions are watching. And that once a rumor starts, even the truth struggles to catch up. This situation also reignited old conversations about the Braxton family dynamic. Who feels supported, who feels overshadowed, who feels unheard. Fans debated those dynamics endlessly, often forgetting that they were discussing real sisters with decades of shared history, not fictional characters. At the center of it all was Tamar, emotional, exposed, and exhausted. Not because of any confirmed wrongdoing, not because of facts, but because speculation became louder than reality. And that's where part 1 ends, at the emotional breaking point. Because once a person breaks privately, the real damage has already been done publicly. By the time the rumors reached full volume, the situation had already moved beyond anything Tamar Braxton could control. This was no longer about a single comment or moment. It was about how fast the internet can weaponize family tension and turn it into a spectacle. Blogs were the first accelerant. Headlines popped up with dramatic wording that blurred the line between speculation and certainty. Words like exposed, leaked, and confirmed appeared even though nothing had been verified. Screenshots with no sources circulated. Old clips were stitched together to suggest narratives that didn't exist in real time. And as always, context was the first casualty. Fans flooded comment sections demanding answers not from the blogs but from Tamar herself. Why isn't she speaking? If it's not true, just say that. Why is she crying then? Those demands revealed a harsh reality of celebrity culture. Silence is treated like a provocation. The public expects instant access and immediate clarification, forgetting that people process pain differently and privately. Behind the scenes, Tamar reportedly felt less attacked by strangers and more wounded by proximity. When rumors are sparked by family-related moments, the emotional impact cuts deeper. It feels personal, it feels unsafe, and it feels like betrayal even when intent isn't malicious. That's where the tension around Toni Braxton intensified. Toni didn't rush to the internet to correct the narrative. She didn't jump into comment sections or go live to clarify what was meant or what wasn't. And just like Tamar's silence, Toni's quiet became its own storyline. Some fans interpreted it as maturity, refusing to engage in internet chaos. Others read it as indifference. A few went as far as calling it cold. None of those interpretations were grounded in confirmed facts. They were emotional reactions shaped by expectation. Expectation is powerful. The audience expects siblings to defend each other publicly. When that doesn't happen, people assume fractures where there may only be boundaries. But public families don't heal the same way private ones do. Every word becomes a headline. Every clarification becomes a new debate. So silence becomes a shield, even when it's misunderstood. As speculation grew, Tamar's emotional state became a talking point instead of a concern. People debated why she was upset instead of acknowledging that she was. That shift matters. When empathy is replaced by analysis, humanity disappears. What many overlooked is how long Tamar has been open about emotional health, vulnerability, and the toll of public life. Watching a new wave of invasive rumors attach themselves to her name wasn't just frustrating, it was triggering. And triggers don't need truth to hurt. The situation also reopened old wounds about the Braxton family dynamic: who gets grace, who gets criticized, who is expected to be strong, and who is allowed to fall apart. Fans revisited past seasons, old interviews, and family arguments, treating them like evidence in a case that never existed. That retroactive storytelling fueled the fire. Suddenly, past disagreements were reframed as long-standing resentment. Emotional moments from years ago were recast as foreshadowing. And Tamar's current pain was used to justify narratives that ignored growth, reconciliation, and context. This is the danger of binge analysis culture. It collapses time. Everything becomes connected. Nothing is allowed to evolve. People are frozen at their worst moments. And Tamar felt that freeze in real time. Meanwhile, those closest to her reportedly encouraged distance from social media, not to hide but to heal. Constant exposure to speculation amplifies stress. Every notification becomes a reminder that strangers are discussing your life without consent. So Tamar stepped back. That step back frustrated some fans who wanted answers, but it also revealed who was actually paying attention. Supporters noticed the change in energy, the absence of humor, the heaviness, and they spoke up, calling for compassion instead of curiosity. Their voices mattered, but they were quieter than the outrage machine. As for Toni, the pressure mounted in a different way. People expected her to play mediator, protector, or clarifier, roles that may not reflect reality. Siblings don't always move in sync. And family love doesn't always show up as public defense. What outsiders see as silence could simply be private communication. But the internet doesn't wait for nuance. Instead, it demanded sides. And once sides are chosen, stories harden. This part of the saga exposed a painful truth. Public families are never allowed to process conflict privately. Every misstep becomes content. Every emotion becomes interpretation. And every rumor becomes a referendum on character. That weight is exhausting. The situation didn't escalate because of facts. It escalated because of speed. Speed of reposts, speed of assumptions, speed of judgment. And once speed takes over, care falls behind. By the end of this phase, the damage wasn't about belief, it was about trust. Trust within family relationships, trust in public perception. Trust in the idea that privacy can exist at all when fame is involved. Tamar's tears weren't a confession, they were a response to overload. And Toni's silence wasn't proof, it was a boundary whether people respected it or not. This is where part 2 closes. At the point where the internet keeps talking, but the people involved retreat inward, trying to protect what's left of their peace. Because when noise gets too loud, survival sometimes means stepping away. By the time the internet quieted down, the real work had only just begun. The work nobody sees, nobody clicks on, and nobody monetizes. This was the stage where headlines stopped trending, but the emotional consequences stayed behind. And for the Braxton sisters, especially Tamar Braxton and Toni Braxton, this stage was the hardest. Public families don't get recovery time. When a rumor explodes, outsiders assume that once it stops trending, the damage is done. But inside families, that's when conversations actually start. Awkward, painful, and deeply personal conversations that can't happen in comment sections. For Tamar, the emotional fallout wasn't about clearing her name. It was about rebuilding safety. Safety in her own family, safety in her public image, safety in knowing that the people closest to her wouldn't become unintentional catalysts for online chaos again. That kind of safety doesn't come from statements or clapbacks, it comes from boundaries. Sources close to Tamar suggest she took a step back not only from social media but from emotional labor. She stopped explaining, stopped justifying, stopped trying to manage how others felt about her. That shift mattered because Tamar has historically been the one expected to react, to perform emotion, to be expressive for the audience. This time she chose something different: containment. Containment doesn't look dramatic, it looks quiet, it looks distant, and it often gets misunderstood. Meanwhile, Toni faced a different kind of pressure. As the older sister, as the one often seen as the stable figure, expectations landed heavily on her shoulders. Fans wanted her to fix it, clarify it, smooth it over publicly. But sibling dynamics don't work on timelines, and they don't heal through press releases. What the public rarely sees is that family conversations happen off camera, messy, emotional, unresolved at times. Apologies aren't always instant, understanding isn't always mutual, and healing doesn't always follow a neat arc. The internet wants closure, families want peace, those two desires often clash. As weeks passed, fans noticed subtle shifts. Tamar slowly re-emerged, not addressing the rumors, not referencing the drama, but returning to work, creativity, and moments of joy. That choice wasn't avoidance, it was reclamation. Refusing to let a rumor define the chapter meant writing a different one entirely. And that's powerful. At the same time, the public began to realize something uncomfortable. There was never any proof to justify the frenzy. No confirmation. No documents, no statements, just speculation amplified by family proximity and algorithmic hunger. That realization didn't erase the harm, but it did expose the mechanism behind it. This saga became a case study in how familial tension plus public platforms can create perfect storms. A comment here, a silence there, add millions of viewers, and suddenly private relationships are on trial. The long-term impact of moments like this isn't just emotional, it's relational. Trust takes a hit, communication changes, people become more guarded. What used to be casual becomes calculated because anything can be misinterpreted once it leaves the living room. For the Braxtons, that likely meant reassessing what stays private and what never touches the internet again. And that reassessment matters. Public families don't owe transparency at the cost of their mental health. They don't owe explanations for rumors they didn't start. And they don't owe access to every corner of their relationships just because cameras once followed them. This situation forced that boundary into the spotlight. Fans also played a role in the aftermath. Some apologized publicly for participating in the speculation. Others doubled down, insisting that where there's smoke, there's fire. That split revealed how differently people consume celebrity culture, some with empathy, others with entitlement. But empathy doesn't trend as fast as suspicion. Over time, the narrative shifted again, not because it was resolved, but because attention moved on. And that's the bittersweet part of internet cycles. They end not with answers, but with distraction. Yet the sisters are left with the residue. What this chapter ultimately shows is that healing in public families often happens in spite of the audience, not because of it. It happens quietly, imperfectly, without announcements, and without satisfying the crowd's appetite for closure. Tamar didn't owe tears to the camera. Toni didn't owe explanations to strangers. What they owed themselves was protection. And protection sometimes looks like silence, sometimes like distance, sometimes like choosing not to reopen wounds for the sake of narrative completion. This story doesn't have a dramatic resolution, and that's intentional. Real life rarely does. What it has instead is a lesson about restraint, about the cost of speculation, and about how quickly family bonds can be tested when the world is watching. The internet may move on, but the experience stays. And if there's one thing this saga made clear, it's this: not every family conflict belongs to the public. Not every rumor deserves oxygen, and not every silence is an invitation. This is where part 3 closes, not with answers, but with perspective. By the time the noise finally settled, the most important truth emerged quietly. Nothing about this situation required the internet's permission to heal. The speculation slowed not because it was resolved, but because attention moved on, and that's often how public storms end. They don't close with answers, they fade, leaving the people involved to deal with what remains. For Tamar Braxton, the path forward wasn't about addressing every rumor or correcting every assumption. It was about reclaiming authorship over her own life. When narratives are imposed from the outside, the strongest response is often not rebuttal, it's consistency. Showing up, continuing to work, choosing joy where possible, and refusing to let a false storyline define the chapter. That decision takes strength, especially after emotional overload, because what the public rarely sees is the aftermath. The anxiety spikes, the trust recalibration, the careful re-entry into spaces that once felt safe. The internet doesn't apologize when it moves on, it simply forgets. The people at the center don't get that luxury. Meanwhile, Toni Braxton faced a different kind of reckoning, one shaped by expectation. As the older sister, as a public figure often perceived as measured and reserved, there was pressure to fix the situation publicly. But families don't heal through press statements. They heal through conversations that aren't meant for comment sections. Silence, in this final phase, wasn't avoidance. It was containment. Containing the story so it couldn't keep expanding. Containing the hurt so it didn't spill into spectacle. Containing the family bond so it could be protected from further erosion. This is where the lesson sharpens. Public families live with a constant paradox. Their lives invite interest, but their humanity demands limits. When those limits are ignored, even unintentionally, the cost is paid privately. And in this case, the cost was emotional safety, a resource far more fragile than reputation. The internet often treats rumors like puzzles to solve, but some things are not puzzles, they're people. When speculation turns invasive, curiosity becomes entitlement, and entitlement becomes harm. This story revealed how quickly that shift can happen, and how hard it is to reverse once momentum builds. Over time, what lingers isn't the rumor itself, it's the behavioral residue it leaves behind. People become more guarded. Conversations move offline, boundaries harden. What once felt casual becomes deliberate because anything can be reframed once it enters the algorithm. That recalibration is not failure, it's adaptation. As the weeks passed, the public saw what they needed to see, life continuing. Not as a performance, not as a rebuttal, but as proof that rumors don't get to write endings. The absence of a dramatic reveal frustrated some viewers, but that frustration says more about consumption habits than it does about truth. Real life doesn't always deliver closure on demand, and that's okay. If there's a final takeaway here, it's this: restraint matters. Restraint in what we repeat, restraint in how we frame, restraint in assuming access to lives we don't live. Commentary has power, and power requires care, especially when family dynamics and personal identity are involved. This chapter closes not with an exposé, but with a reminder that dignity doesn't need defending. That silence can be protective, and that families deserve the space to heal away from the spotlight. The internet may have moved on, the lesson should not. Now I want to hear from you. After everything we unpacked, do you think the internet crossed the line, turning family tension into invasive speculation? Should public figures be expected to respond to rumors they didn't create? Or is silence sometimes the healthiest boundary? And where do we, as viewers, draw the line between curiosity and respect? Drop your thoughts in the comments, thoughtfully and respectfully, because conversations like this matter beyond clicks. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because whenever real updates happen, not rumors, not assumptions, we'll be right here breaking them down with clarity and care. Drama fades fast, but empathy and responsibility should always stay trending.